Good morning, everyone. It's Michelle Hill with Southern Inspirations, and I am back with Dr. Dawn Hamby for another episode of Monday Huddle. And you know what, Dawn? I think I just said good morning. It's afternoon already. Oh my goodness. So happy
You
Monday.
like a Monday morning so much. And we started off with the Monday morning huddle. We think it's morning time. The day flies by when you're having fun. Isn't that right?
It absolutely does. I think we just got in that habit of Monday morning huddle, and so
Yes.
started off and said, "Good morning, everyone." Hey, one thing about us is we are transparent, and we're like, you know what? We just kind of own it and roll with it. So,
Amen, sister.
on another Monday already. These wonderful huddles that we do. And we're here today, y'all, for part 2 of Dr. Hamby's 3-part series on what to do before, during, and after the interview. So,
Yes.
right along, right?
Exactly. This is exciting stuff.
It absolutely is. I'm going to pop our information up here right quick, and then we can just get right into what we're talking about today, and that is the during, because we talked last week about what to do to be prepared ahead of time before you ever show up. And so you kind of get ready, your resume's looking great, you're ready right, you're getting there early, and you're ready to go. And you know what? That's when the nerves can really kick in, right?
Absolutely. You're not nervous necessarily the day or two before when you're doing all of that preparedness we talked about in the last episode. You might get nervous the day of the interview, whether it's face to face or virtually, right, Michelle? It can be nerve wracking.
Right. Absolutely.
Yes.
So that leads us to you have 3 main things to focus on for during the interview, right?
Absolutely. And to remind our audience, the tips that I like to share on the Monday Huddle is a little teaser of the more in-depth kind of work we can do if you're doing, say, career coaching, right? Because as much as we love doing the show, we could talk about this for such a long time. So we want to make it sort of a fun lunch and learn format. So to do that, I'm typically going to share maybe 3 to 5 tips at the most. So just keep that in mind because this is just the tip of the iceberg, like I like to say, of the
That's
more
exactly right.
we can do. So there's definitely more than 3, but today on this Monday, I want to share with you just 3 easy tips to think about for what to do actually during the interview. So in the last episode last week, we got you all prepared to get there. Now you're actually there, either in person or virtually. So my first tip is to make sure that you arrive at least 30 minutes early, even if it's a virtual interview. Again, like we talked about last week, you've already checked to make sure your computer connections and everything is working if you're doing an interview on a virtual platform, right? But you still want to be in that virtual waiting room early because the person who's hosting that interview, they can see when you arrive. Now, if you are lucky to get a face-to-face, and some companies are back to doing that now, they're just practicing that social distancing and expecting people to wear masks, perhaps wait in the car until you're called to come in, those kinds of things. So if you are in a face-to-face interview, you especially want to get there early because, again, you want to make sure you're showing the interview team that you are prepared and you're ready to go. Another tip I have for you, if you are there face to face, make sure that you go to that front desk, introduce yourself to the folks at the front desk. Now, if you followed my tip from last week, you've already gone to that physical venue. If you're having a face to face meeting, you've already checked in with security or the front desk personnel to find out where the interview is going to be and to confirm that. But the day of the interview, you still want to get there in plenty of time. Do you realize, Michelle, at some of the top jobs, the ones that are the most competitive, where on average you might have 50 people applying for the same position? Do you know that HR managers are told to watch the activities of the folks in the lobby waiting to be interviewed? So, for example, if it's a very competitive type of job to get, do you know that HR managers are told to let them know if anybody's on their cell phone. Now, you might think if I'm looking down at my cell phone, I know not to be on the phone waiting for them to come get me for the interview. You might think there's not a problem with maybe checking your email, returning a text, right? Because what if they need to get a hold of you? You're thinking, well, I've got to have my phone right here if they call and want to know if I've arrived or what have you. But if you get there early, they've already been notified that you're there. And if you're on a virtual platform, they already know that you're there. But it's especially important when you're there physically. There is an understanding that if you're on your cell phone, you're a little distracted. They may not know that you're perhaps multitasking. You might think it's unfair, but they have been known to actually ask job candidates who are in the lobby on their cell phone, even if it's on silent, even if they're just emailing or texting, they've been known to ask those candidates to leave. Why? Because that candidate does not look as serious and as committed as the person that's sitting there, and perhaps they've got their glasses on and they've got their folder open and they're just reviewing their materials. Somebody who's reviewing their materials and they only brought in that maybe folder or some sort of briefcase, and that's all they're looking at are some materials. That person looks more committed and dedicated to the job. So that's why it's very important to arrive at least half an hour early. Everybody knows that you're there, and then you can kind of calm down and focus on getting ready to do your best job possible on answering those questions.
Well, another thing too, again, with following the advice from last week, if they've already been to the venue and met that receptionist or that security person at the front, there's already somewhat of a rapport. And rather than looking down at their phone the entire time, they could be asking some casual questions of the receptionist, or, learning if there's anything special going on that day. That way, when they walk into the interview, it'd be real easy and make, I would think, quite an impression if they said, well, Sally just mentioned that your employee barbecue is today, or,
That's right.
Like that. So just another reason to put those phones away at those opportune times.
Absolutely.
Good advice. Well, that
Great.
leads us to number 2, speaking of meeting people.
Exactly. Number 2 is make sure that you actually introduce yourself to the team. You want to meet the team, right? So whether it's virtual or in person, yes, they know what your name is. They've got your information in front of them. So it would be something easy to skip over. You might think, oh, I don't need to introduce myself. They just called me by name. Yeah, they called you by name to come in, or perhaps your name is on the screen if it's a virtual interview. But it's still a great professional courtesy to say, hi, I'm Dr. Dawn Hamby. I am so thrilled to meet you, and introduce yourself to each person, either on the screen or face to face. It looks professional. It automatically establishes rapport. You mentioned rapport, Michelle, with the folks at the front desk. Rapport is important because one of the first things that's happening, whether it's through the computer or face to face, is the interview team is trying to gauge what the personality is that you bring to the table. There is sort of this intrinsic feeling about whether you're a good fit. And a good fit doesn't always mean that you have all the qualifications. Many times people can recognize personalities that seem great to work with. You've got such a positive energy that people want to work with you. Or if you're kind of putting off this other type of energy, it's your opportunity perhaps to turn that around because you want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward. So introducing yourself, officially meeting the team, that's one part of step 2, is to definitely do that. Now, once you've introduced yourself to the team, the rest of the time during the interview, you want to make sure that that team really gets to know you. And one of the ways to do that and to make sure that you're actually showcasing all of the amazing skills you bring to the table is when you're answering those interview questions, make sure you give specific examples. Right, Michelle? It's easy to forget. If you say things like, I'm a very organized person, okay? The interview team may have heard that from 3 other candidates, but if you can explain how you took the current filing system the office is using and you helped it convert to an all electronic system where now all the information is at everyone's fingertips and they're not trying to dig around in some file cabinet, blow the dust off the file, right? That kind of thing. If you can give a story, Michelle specializes in spreading great stories, right? An interview is like a story. It's you telling your story of your expertise and your experience. So if you can tell a story of a great accomplishment that is related to the job you're currently applying for, and you
Right.
can give specific examples of how it went well in your previous job position, that it's going to be very valuable. And that team you just introduced yourself to, they're going to consider you as a valuable job candidate.
That's absolutely right. Dawn, do you think it's a good idea when preparing before the interview, like we talked about last week, and preparing yourself to present yourself, put your best foot forward, so to speak, in terms of your skills and abilities? Do you think it's a good idea to jot down 2 or 3 of your top skills or your top strengths that are relevant to the job for which you're applying and have a story ready to go with those kind of in your head already ready? Like to your example, if I know that I am very good at organizing, I need to know ahead of time what is my organizing story. Or if I'm a really good multitasker, if I'm an expert at creating efficiencies because I have a certain way of multitasking, then I need to have that story ready. Is that a good idea to kind of think through some of those things?
It's a terrific idea. I can tell you personally, with all of the interviews I've conducted in hiring staff, that when a job candidate can bring up a story in a very specific example, especially if it's really related to the position they're applying for, and they have that ready to go, and they can tell me that's within their top 2 to 3 skills that they bring to the table, I'm very impressed by that, because I've not only conducted a lot of interviews for positions I'm personally hiring for, but I've also been blessed to be part of interview teams for other hiring supervisors. And when the candidate leaves the room, one of the first things that you typically will do is the team will discuss how they felt the candidate did. And those times that I've seen a job candidate, especially at the end of the interview, where we typically ask, do you have anything else you would like to tell us about yourself? Well, if you haven't followed steps that we've shared with you on this episode or the last episode, you might be tempted to just all of a sudden share all of these personal examples, tell them everything about yourself, but maybe not tell them about these skills that could really help them. Because Michelle, one thing that I think a lot of folks maybe don't know if they haven't interviewed in a while, and for some of us, we have just either not interviewed in years or we've not had the good fortune to sit on the other side of the table and know what it's like to be the person conducting the interview. And what happens is sometimes people are so excited about the job opportunity that, yes, Michelle, they'll talk about the skills like you talked about. Here's my top 2 or 3 skills. But then sometimes they forget to mention all the ways they think they can help the organization. You see, even if you're enthusiastic and you're talking about how this is your dream job and you would love to work there, the interview team thinks that's great. I always think that's very sweet when somebody says that the job they're interviewing for is something they've dreamt about. Who doesn't love that? But you know what I'm really looking for? I'm going to be a little selfish because I know I need a top-notch candidate. And this is their opportunity to shine. And if they can't tell me at least an example or 2 of how they think they can help me make my job easier,
right?
And if another candidate mentions 2 or 3 strategies they've already thought about that they think would be very helpful, I'm going to be a little bit more impressed with that. So I want you, when I talk about meeting the team in step 2, I want you to really do that research we talked about in the previous episode. I want you to research that company. If you can find out who's going to be on that interview team, many times, again, that may not be a secret. They might say you're going to have 3 people from senior management, or they might say 2 people from personnel and 1 person from, say, this other department. You could do a little bit of research even if you don't get the names of the folks who will be on the interview team. And if you do that research, as we suggested in last week's show, then you're going to be very prepared to think about ways you can make the organization not better. Nobody wants to hear that you're here to make their organization better, right? You might think you can help it be better, but you know what that tells me as a hiring supervisor? That tells me that you don't think we're doing a great job. I want to think we're doing an amazing job. Thank you very much. You know, people get kind of defensive, right? It's like family, Michelle, right? Like family.
Right.
I can criticize my family, but don't you dare. So if somebody is telling me, oh, I can make this so great, I can make it better, I can make your numbers do this, this, and this, I don't necessarily want to hear that. I want to hear that after you've gotten the job and you're telling me all these things you think we could do that would be great. I want to hear that you love the organization so much and that you have thought about ways to make life easier for the staff and for the organization. Not that we are just floundering around and need you to come save us. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
So,
Right.
about ways that you can contribute while recognizing the accomplishments of the organization and the company already. Because people want to know that you're excited to work there, but they really, really want to know that your skill set can help them continue to be a success.
Absolutely. Good information. Well, that leads us to our final tip for today's episode, and that is leave additional information. Tell us a little bit more about that.
I'm telling you, Michelle, I have always been so impressed when someone applies for a job and they have brought additional information I didn't even ask for. So I want to kind of go over that. Some examples of additional info, okay? Many times today, you are going to submit everything electronically. You're going to submit that job application electronically. If they needed your resume ahead of time, which 99% of the time they will, then you've uploaded that perhaps in the application as well. But whether it's a virtual interview or face-to-face, I think it's important to provide extra copies, not only of your resume and making sure it's current and up to date, but I think it's also important to leave information they didn't even ask for. So it could, for example, be a wonderful letter of recommendation. Sure, Human Resources is going to ask you to list 2 professional and 1 personal recommendation, right? A reference. So they typically ask you for a name and a phone number. And then when they get a hold of that person, they're going to ask specific questions. Were you a coworker? Were you a friend, etc.? So that's one thing. But if the interview team has a letter on someone's official letterhead, and that person's taken the time to talk about the wonderful contributions you've made, that makes an impression. So even though we know we can call that person, if you actually have an old school letter of reference, it really bodes well. My favorite example of extra or additional info is when a candidate brings examples of their work. I love that, Michelle. It could be photos of before and after. If you say you're an organized person, let me see the before and after picture of something that you did. If you said you're a team player and you believe in volunteering your time for a great organization that your company is supporting, let me see a photo of you out there at that booth with the company's logo above you working on a Saturday. Those are the kinds of things that you could bring to the table. You could print examples of that. You could send it by an email attachment. And if you do that ahead of time, that interview team's already thinking, oh, yes, Michelle's interviewing today. And guys, did you notice she sent all of this additional info? So that makes your job even easier as an interview team member when you see somebody has taken the initiative. Who doesn't love initiative?
Yes.
So typically, more information is better. It really is. So if you can show examples of your work, letters of reference on official stationery that really showcase your talents, and then in addition to that, extra copies of your resume that's current and really is catered to the job position. Michelle, more and more companies want resumes that are really catered to that particular position.
Yes.
They don't want something too general.
Right.
So if
Right.
you have a job interview scheduled, you need to either tweak that resume yourself or send it to a professional like myself and make sure that it's really geared towards the specific job you're applying for. So again, if you have all of that and you leave that information with them, it's just impressive and really shows your best talents.
Absolutely. Will make you stand out above the rest for sure, because not everyone is going to think to show up with those items. And so showing your proactivity, like you said, taking initiative, and it just gives you an extra star by your name when the team is discussing all the candidates that have been in for the day.
It really does, Michelle. And I
Mhm.
mentioned volunteer work and causes, but do you know how many organizations really love it when they have a candidate who's well-rounded?
Yes.
So many companies today, especially now with what our world is going through, if you're supporting a cause and you just show that you volunteer your time, you know, of course you want it to be genuine. Please don't sign up for
Right.
something so that you can volunteer.
Yeah.
Don't do that. But if you're involved in some causes you really believe in, companies really like that. And they're not going to necessarily ask you about that in an interview. But if you have the initiative to say that in addition to being passionate about your work, you also love to support nonprofits and different causes, and you have an example of that, that really is just a candidate who stands out and somebody you probably want to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, speaking of resume and making sure that it is updated and well represents your skills and talents as relevant to the job for which you're applying, that's part of your career confidence boot camp that you offer. And next week, we're going to cover part 3, of course, of the abbreviated part, you know, what you do after the interview. But tell us more about what I call the full meal deal in the career confidence boot camp.
That's right. This is the full package, Michelle. The full package. Right. So this 3-part series that we're covering in our show today, and that, as Michelle pointed out, will finish next week. In the Career Confidence Boot Camp, I put together something very special. Typically, my clients can choose individual programs. And so if someone's getting ready for the interview and they feel like they really have everything taken care of, but they really wanted some tips on what to actually do during the interview, then they could actually purchase just that coaching session. But oftentimes, when it comes to something as important as an interview, there's so many pieces to that. So it's not just what you need to do before, during, and after, but it also includes that current resume. So the Career Confidence Bootcamp is a special pricing package I've put together on the website. People can go to drdawnshoptalk.com. And when they purchase that package, it's just a better value because you get all 3 of the sessions, which is the shows that we've been doing in this 3-part series. You get the before, during, and after interview tips. And in addition to that, you don't just get the 3 tips we're talking about. You're going to get the full enchilada, all the tips that I share with my clients to get them ready to apply for that job. Then in addition to that, the Resume Reboot, which is a separate program, that is also part of that package, again, at a discounted price. So if someone thinks that they really would be interested in getting the resume done as well as those coaching sessions, they can just purchase the package right off the website.
Awesome. I love it. And I've got that populated there. So that's real easy for y'all to navigate to. So check that out so that you can get everything to be best prepared for that interview. So we mentioned it a little bit ago, but next week, June 22nd, at noon, same time, we will do part 3 of the 3-part series to wrap up this interview process. And Dawn's going to give us some great tips about what to do after the interview, because you don't just get to walk out of the interview and go, phew, and I don't have anything else to do. I mean, you can maybe for a moment, maybe just temporarily. Not that I want to give away too much, but, you know, I think the minute you get home, there's some post-interview steps that need to be taken.
Yeah.
Again, continue to make yourself stand out. So I'm not going to say any more than that because we don't want to give it away. But there'll be some great tips for that part of the interview process. So we're looking forward to that next week.
Absolutely, yes, because we want to keep it a little bit of a secret, but you're right, Michelle, we want people to realize that the candidates who really are going to stand out are not going to forget that third important step, what to do after.
That's exactly right. Well, that wraps up today. I'm going to put the website up there one more time because I want folks to not forget where to go to get the additional tips for not only this series, but every Monday huddle and Monday morning huddle since we started this partnership. So I'll leave folks with that. Anything else we want to share?
The only other thing I think I would add is back to that career confidence boot camp. When folks hire me as their career coach, what they're getting, and this is all explained on the website, they're not just getting that information. I actually offer one-on-one coaching with that client. So if you are taking 3 classes, then we're going to work together for those 3 weeks. We meet virtually, so we don't have to worry about, the health hazards today. But we meet for an hour. I send you the information, and then I coach you for those 3 weeks. And then the 4th week is for you to review that resume, give me any feedback you might need, and then you will also receive a current resume, and you get 2 copies of that with some additional information. So just to remind folks that when you hire a career coach, whether it's Shop Talk or you go with another career coach, make sure you're not just getting the materials. You want to get that one-on-one time. That's an important part of helping you get ready, whether it's for an interview or perhaps even a life coaching session. It's important to have that one-on-one time with your career coach to make sure you're bringing your best talents forward.
Absolutely. Wonderful advice. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Monday Huddle with Dr. Dawn Shop Talk. And we will see you right here next week for part 3. Everyone have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Happy Monday.